Dumelang, Rialocha, Aushen, and welcome to a brand new season of Ubuntu Uplift, the podcast brought to you by CivSource South Africa and its wonderful guests. A podcast where we dive into the big questions about how philanthropy can be more intentional, inclusive, and truly transformative in the lives of South Africa's youth. I'm your host, Oratile Mokase, and together, in this brand new season of Ubuntu Uplift, we'll be speaking with change makers, thought leaders, and grassroots activists who are working every day to turn that possibility into reality. This season of Ubuntu Uplift, our vision has been to spark conversations that don't just inspire, but also challenge us to rethink the way we give and the way we support our communities. Our mission is simple but bold: to amplify youth voices, highlight innovative approaches to social impact, and reimagine philanthropy as a force that uplifts deeply, not just broadly. And this new season marks an exciting step in that journey. For Season 2, we're asking a powerful question: can effective, targeted philanthropy reshape the socioeconomic trajectory of young people in this country? The reality is, young people today face a plethora of challenges, from digital exclusion and unemployment to a lack of safe spaces and real opportunities in civic spaces. So what are we missing as a civil society? And that is the question I'd like us to explore in this season. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who's working right at the heart of this conversation, Jean Vittich, from the Ingelosi Foundation. Jean is the director of the Ingelosi Foundation, an organization committed to strengthening communities through strategic, youth-centered philanthropy. Her work focuses on urban targeted social investments with a vision of ensuring that interventions meet young people exactly where they are, whether in schools, local communities, or grassroots initiatives. Jean brings years of experience in philanthropy and youth development and is passionate about creating opportunities that empower rather than prescribe. Her insights into how targeted giving can reshape socioeconomic futures make her a vital voice in South Africa's philanthropic landscape. So I've taken a long spiel just to introduce us through what we hope to achieve in Ubuntu Uplift. I think I've gotten the formalities out of the way so we can jump straight into the conversation part. Like I said, Jean, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's always such a pleasure to make new friends in this space that it almost feels like a one-man battle against this huge army of socioeconomic problems, but it's always nice to find someone who's doing something similar or in the heart of it has a similar vision for young people in this country. I think being a young person myself, I always have the youth and what we face as a country and what that means for us at the center of my mind. And I'm excited to see what our conversations bring to the table. So Jean, can you start off by telling us about maybe the Ingelosi Foundation and your role there and what first drew you into the space of youth empowerment?
Yeah, I think from a personal level, I've always wanted to be doing something helpful. And when this opportunity came along with Ingelosi Foundation, it really just spoke to everything that I believe in, the goals and the ideas behind it, and the sort of deep-hearted desire to do something for other people. So, yeah, when I met with Jenny, who's the chair lady of Ingelosi Foundation, we actually met on the side of the soccer field and watching our children play soccer. And we just instantly sort of clicked. When she started Ingelosi Foundation, I really bought into the idea of what she wanted to do, what her vision was, and so I just grew from there.
So what I'm hearing, it kind of helps if you actually care and have a place for it in your heart. So I think having a place for helping, like you said, having a place for young people. And can you say that there was a turning point or a story that showed you the importance of just working with young people and impacting young people's lives?
Yeah, I think if we look at the youth that we are dealing with or trying to relate to every day, they all come with these massive stories that we can't even begin to understand. So something that is really simple for us is something that becomes a challenge for them on a daily basis. So, you go out there with the best intentions and you think that asking them to do a certain thing is a simple task. And yet for them, because of where they've come from, their vulnerability, and the way that they relate, the way that they see the world, the way that they relate to it, it becomes something for them that's insurmountable. And you have to really dig deep and find out what the underlying problems are and what the cultural issues, the emotional issues, all sorts of things, like I say, that we battle to understand, or we can battle to understand. So it's very difficult to single out one person or one thing that changed my mind. Do you remember when I was still sort of doing this on my own, we used to go and do Christmas gifts and those sort of things just as a family. And the man that was facilitating that for us, we arrived at the venue all bright-eyed and ready to do our thing. And he was late, and we sort of think, I was late and so on. And when he arrived, he said, I've just been trying to talk someone from jumping off a bridge, So, that's sort of, here we're sitting with our little Christmas gifts thinking that we're doing this great thing. Meanwhile, this man is trying to stop someone from ending their lives. And that really is the reality of what we're dealing with. We don't know how close the people that we serve are to this desperate vulnerability. So, no.
And I think just jumping on what she said about there's so many different things that could be simple for one person, but could be a difference between livelihood, a difference between making a difference in their lives because of social challenges, because of environmental challenges. And having taken that into consideration, in your view, what does effective and targeted philanthropy look like, especially in an urban South African context?
Well, for me, it looks like people helping others, and in so doing, helping themselves. Whilst, yes, we deal with an extremely vulnerable sector of population, there is still this innate need and innate desire to not only do good for yourself, but to do good for other people. And it's unbelievable, as I said, when you find so many people in such vulnerable states that they still feel the need to help other people. But they battle to understand how to put that into something that, first of all, is marketable for them, something that they could turn into a source of income for themselves. And they battle to always identify exactly what the problem is. So that's where targeted philanthropy comes in, where you help them to identify the problem. You show them ways in which they can help their community, and in so doing, help themselves.
I think when you talk about helping someone to be able to empower themselves and in turn feed into this innate desire to help those around you, I think you also talked about how at different ages or at different points in a person's life, again, how something can be simple for a 10-year-old who lives in a completely different neighborhood than a 10-year-old that lives in a contrasting neighborhood. I just wanted to draw now the attention a little bit more to the work that you do through Ingalosi, and having had the opportunity to work with age groups of youth and young people across different times in their lives, across different developmental stages, how do the needs of youth, from what you've seen, differ across age groups, for example, children, teenagers, young adults, and how do you think philanthropy should respond to these differences?
So, we deal with the sort of 16 to 35-year-old market, we can call it. So I don't have much exposure to small children. There is so much good work being done for little children, all the ECDs, all the homework support centers and so on, because people have identified a real need for that. So the sector that we're dealing with is kind of like an unsexy sector, because everybody loves giving a little gift to a 4-year-old because they're just innately happy, and to give a 4-year-old a new pair of shoes, that's their day or their year or their whatever made. When you start getting to 16, they become a lot more wary. They become a lot more in a certain way. They know what they want. So they don't generally, they know what a handout is. They're much more savvy and understanding this, you're just trying to tick a box here. Whereas this is something that would really make a difference to me. So with our 16 to 18-year-olds, we work very hard on self-esteem, self-development, and ways in which they can learn about themselves and understand themselves, and ways in which they can put themselves out into the world where they don't come across as being sort of street smart, but with no sort of depth to that street smartness. So a lot of them are in survival mode constantly. But they don't have that depth of knowledge about themselves and that depth of knowledge about their capabilities to confidently put themselves forward. So that's our sort of 16 to 18-year-old sector. And then from 18 years upwards, and, people will often question me and say, how can you call a 35-year-old person a youth? But and my response to that is look where they came from. They missed out on huge educational building blocks in the time that they were born, when South Africa was just in a complete state. So in certain ways, our youngsters are getting a lot more advantages because things are a little bit more structured now. I'm not saying that it's fantastic, but they are getting a lot more structure and they are getting a lot more attention. Our 18 to 35-year-olds actually are almost like a forgotten generation. They didn't get support. They were brought up by their bootstraps. They again were in complete survival mode, and their fundamental building blocks are missing. So once again, it's those things that we take for granted, that people who may have had a better education or a better family life, or all those things that contribute to the person being the person that they are missing. And so we almost starting from scratch. So an 18-year-old is actually similar in emotional capability to possibly a 10-year-old, because their confidence levels are so low. They don't know where they belong, where they fit in. Obviously, this is a generalization. It's not every person that's 18 to 35 has stuff going on, but most do. And a lot of them have been able to paper over the stuff and move on and once again, like I say, survive and survive and survive. But when you actually start looking at the person, you realize that there are just pieces missing. And almost like trying to build a puzzle with, like a 100-piece puzzle, and 75 of the pieces are missing. So we've got to find those pieces, and we've got to put them back into the people that need that, and show them their value and show them that they actually deserve.
I think when you talk about, I like the word unsexy sector. Nothing I want to coin that. I'm part of the unsexy sector. But when you say that, it really reminds me of a time during COVID. I think COVID had such a big impact on a lot of different people. But more especially, what was interesting for the youth is that the introduction of the youth SASSA grant, when it first came into fruition, I think it put things into perspective of how many young people actually are in need of help that are often overlooked. And I stand to be corrected, but I do believe that it's ongoing now. And it goes to show that even after such a turn point in our society like COVID, there are underlying issues and underlying challenges that affect the unsexy sector, or I'd say the people that fall through some of the development stages that you talked about. But from your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges facing urban youth right now? I think from the top of my head, I can think of obviously unemployment. I think that's a plight that affects all of us, if not majority of us. Maybe digital exclusion. But from your experience, I'd say, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see that urban youth are facing right now?
I think that a lot of it boils down to safety. In those, you could say safety for all the things you mentioned. So access to safe urban space, and access to digital inclusion.
Yeah,
is that where do you go? Where do you go consistently? Where you're going to be able to sit down at get Wi-Fi connection, be able to do the work that you need to do, make your connections, make a phone call, all these things again that are often taken for granted. But you might go to a place today that has the computer hub. Overnight, someone breaks in and steals all the compute. Again, it kind of makes it feel that, you just feel that vulnerability, because you're like, the safe space that I thought I was going to is now no longer safe. That is one of the issues and I can't speak to the rural areas because I really have no experience in rural areas, but I think safety is a key component in urban areas, and creating safe outdoor spaces, creating safe indoor spaces where people know that they can come and that they can be seen and be acknowledged. I think it's very important. And there are plenty of places that are doing fantastic work in the inner city. But you just have to drive through the inner city and look at what it looks like, and that's not how you want people to live. You don't want people to have to climb over rubbish bags to get to work in the morning. Cars driving wrong way down the one-way street. All these little things that make your life that much more challenging, because you don't actually know when you're going to get hit by something, when you're going to fall down a hole, when the place where you arrive at is going to not be there anymore, or all those sort of things. So I think, just general knowing that you're safe is a huge component of their well-being, or of anybody's well-being.
And I think it's quite ironic when you say that it all boils down to safety, because, like, again, the unsexy sector, I think a lot of drawback or a lot of apprehension from different parts of civic society to tap into the youth is a sense, again, of, well, I'm going to where the young people are, but am I safe as an organization? Are my investments safe? Which is, again, why I wanted to talk about targeted philanthropy, and why we are actually called Ubuntu Uplift is that we're hoping to uplift through Ubuntu, right? And I think it's funny, again, when you talk about safety and the misconceptions that maybe civic spaces may have when it comes to young people. So what are some of the misconceptions that you think people might have about targeted giving? When you think about from a corporate space, when you think about from an individual's perspective, some of the things that people may have in their minds and think, I want to help, but I think this and this might happen, which isn't actually the reality in a sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think, and I mean, again, I am generalizing, and I think a lot of corporates are thinking a lot harder about what they're doing now than they were 20 years ago. But it boils down to the good old story of the fish and the teaching a person how to fish. So I can give you fish for every day of the month or whatever, but if I teach you how to fish, you'll be able to fish for the rest of your life. Okay. And a lot more corporates are thinking like that, and not sort of just applying band-aids to a problem that's, if we just give period pads, that's fine. But what about the stigma around periods? What about making it less traumatic for women and girls to speak about these things, making it more acceptable for young men to understand what it's all about. So giving a period pad is a great idea, and obviously it's needed. But what else is going on behind that? What else needs to be done so that the stigma disappears? And I do believe that everybody who's in the philanthropic field has done a lot of work with beating down various stigma, whether it's periods, whether it's HIV, whether it's general poverty, on those sort of things. People are more able to speak about these things. Philanthropy is becoming a lot more focused on the outcome rather than what we put into it. Like, what are we wanting to get out of it? And let's focus on what we're trying to get out of it rather than what are we putting in, what we think needs to be put in. So I do believe that is getting better. It is improving. But I do think that corporates do need to listen to the NGOs, to the people that are in the spaces, and hear what they're actually saying and hear what their views are. Whilst we, obviously in the NGO space, you're always asking for, you would always prefer a cash donation. People are reluctant to give money to things, and I understand that because money has been misused and used and so on. But that is the thing that really helps. Being able to have funds that you can direct into the right spaces, I think is really important. And to find corporates that are able to say, here's X amount, do what you need to do with it. And rather than let us tell you what we think you should be doing with this money.
And I think it's also helpful when you talk about maybe corporates or funders or individuals having that trust in people who are in the space. Because like you said, because you've been around young people, you get to know a person's story. It's no longer about what I think they need. It's now that I know what they need. And it isn't what I know because I have some theory in my head, but because that person has told me, that person has given me the opportunity to come alongside them. And I think we've taken enough time to highlight and put a magnifying glass on the damper parts. I think moving on to a lighter note, because like you said, there is wonderful work that's being done in this space. There are people who are willing to listen. It's a long fight, but it's a fight nonetheless. So I think moving on to a brighter note, if you could share an example maybe of a program or investment that worked particularly well in addressing one of the challenges that we've listed, or something that we haven't even talked about yet.
I think we have been talking in very general terms, and I believe that one of the things that Ingalozi brings to the table is that sort of deep knowledge of individuals. We don't have a massive impact, which makes us very also unsexy for funding, because everybody's looking for impacts and numbers and what it is. But we get to know our people really, really well. And I think, know and understanding again, like I said, their sort of individual needs are. So if you have funds available, you might need funding for one thing where the person sitting next to you needs funding for something else completely different. And yet they're both in the same room, they're doing the same course, they're doing whatever. But, they all have different views, they all have different aspirations. So I think when we connected with CivSource, and you saw us, and you brought to the table this ability for us to kind of say, here are some individuals that have specific needs. And you were able to say, great, we will support these individuals in their individual capacity, not as a lump sum, not as a this, not as a that, but just as the individual that they are with their specific need. And for me, for the foundation, it was just like an aha moment, because again, you completely put your trust in us and in saying that these are the people that need the help the most, and these are their needs, and you got to know them so well as well, and took so much time to get to know them as individuals and understanding needs. And I do think that that's a really good example of how we can try and affect change, because each of those individuals that you were able to help obviously belong to families, belong to communities, belong to whatever. So the effect, even though you're helping one person, the ripples are much broader and much wider, both much further than that. So I think it's important to focus on people and to understand what their needs are, and for them to be valued as individuals, and for their story to be important to everybody and to be acknowledged. And like I say, that's part of the building blocks that makes them into a great, not a better, I don't want to say a better person, but a person that is becoming more whole,
or safer, like
a safer person, a person that has the confidence to be able to say, I can do this, capable of this. Look at people are looking at me, seeing me, listening me, understanding me. And that's what boils down.
And I think those are the kind of outcomes that I think anyone who wants to make a difference would actually want to see in the work that they're doing. I think, like we said, that it's never in vain that someone just gets up and says that I want to help young girls with period stigma and just learning more about their health. I think the level of trust, that level of building agency in a person, I think also just that level of just wanting someone to be better because they choose to be, and they now have the tools to be better. Some of the outcomes that we would like to see in young people in South Africa today. And I think just jumping off of that, what are kind of some of the outcomes have you seen when philanthropy is targeted correctly? So when people are listening, when you get to know a person's story, when you take into consideration all the different things that make that person in that specific, or the way that that person turns out to be, what are kind of the outcomes that you think when we do that right, this is what happens?
We create accountable humans. I think, again, we work in a space where people are used to getting handouts. Yes, they can go to the soup kitchen and they can know that every day they're going to get soup. Okay, or they can go here and they can go to... We want them to be responsible for their lives. We're not going to hold their hands their whole life long. We're going to give them a boost. We're going to help them. We're going to see them. We're going to understand them. But at some point, they need to come to the party and they need to be accountable in their own lives. And that's what we ultimately want to create is like I say, accountable humans that can actually not get knocked down by the first barrier that comes their way. Not worry about the thing said, I must wear a white t-shirt. I don't have a white t-shirt. I'm not coming. We need people that can see beyond that, see the benefit of what they're doing, and understand that their personal growth is part of what's going to make them more financially viable and able to contribute to society.
I think all of the things you said is, in the perfect world, this is what we want every young person to do, to not just look at the environment and think that I'm automatically excluded. Just being there to help people again to be, I'm going to say, a better human being, because we're not in the business of building people in parts, but just helping gap where people have missed it, in a sense. I think from your experiences, from the many beautiful stories that I've also had the privilege to be a part of on the sidelines, what lessons has the Ingalosi Foundation learned about what doesn't work in youth giving? Because I think we've talked in great length about just being there to listen, being there to aid rather than prescribe. But what are some of the things that you can say that I tried this and unfortunately this doesn't work?
It depends what you call working. Like I said, it's for us, we're adamant that we're not about handing things out. We're about providing opportunities. We're about creating a whole person. So, I would like to say that, again, like dishing out food parcels and whatever, there is obviously a need for that. But what it does, it creates a dependence on whoever it is that's doing it, or on the state, or on the whatever, which is not sustainable. You spoke about COVID earlier and people getting their 350 Rand grass, and it's not a lot of money. It's 350 Rand. But there are people that went and out of necessity or whatever, they spent their 350 Rand on food, and then they waited for the next 350 Rand to come. It did or did not come, depending on where they were in the system. And there are people that took that 350 Rand and went and bought flour and eggs and sugar and whatever, and baked biscuits and cupcakes and did things, and then sold those. So their 350 Rand became 700 Rand. So and that's the mindset that we need to cultivate, is that even though you've been given a small sum of money, or you've been given a small bit of assistance, how are you going to make that work for you? And obviously there's different levels of need that we can't overlook. But the more dependence we create on the system, the worse it's going to be, because it's just not sustainable. So people need to be independently motivated.
So I think I like the example that you give of two, the same issue, but two various approaches. How dependent on need, or dependent on knowledge of certain skills, or knowledge of certain markets, or just knowledge in general and awareness of your environment, we can receive the same things as a group of young people. But because of, again, that trust in ourselves, because like you're talking about, if I've developed my self-esteem, if I've developed my sense of I want to make a difference in my life and just in the community around me, what I'm giving, no matter how big or how small, can really then impact how philanthropy is then brought out to young people. And I think, just pedaling back a little bit, Just wanted to ask a question then again when it comes to the disparities between young people. What are some of the issues that you find that young people are facing that can be different, whether it be through gender, whether it be through sexual orientation, whether it be through location, and I think specifically importantly looking in cities versus maybe rural areas. And I think I'm saying this while we're in the heart of Johannesburg, but again, it's important to take a step back and look around you and see what some of the things that we are doing, some of the things that we aren't doing.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I can't really speak to rural areas. I think some of the issues we deal with on a very real level is bullying, and for our youngsters, and not even for the youngsters, even for as you age, you never become immune to bullying. You have to learn how to handle it, and I think that is a big issue in our youth. Again, if I go back to just general safety, where youth are growing up in environments where they're not sure if their parents can pay the rent every month. So they are constantly moving from one place to the next. It makes things very insecure and unstable. The school environment is very tricky for some people. There's no room for people with learning disabilities, or those, in the sort of general offering of what is available to our youth at school. If you had any kind of special need, or if you're an outlier in any way, unfortunately there's very limited capabilities or options for people growing up in the urban cities. And the education systems are sometimes can be flawed. You need support. People need support for what they're doing at school, which is where the homework centers come in and so on. There's just so much. There's so many issues and so many layers. And when you meet, when you're meeting with a person on a monthly basis or a couple of weeks a year or so on, it's very difficult to combat all those issues. And there are so many support structures that are out there. And I think part of our what we try to do is also open up pathways for access to those places. For so many people aren't even aware of the support systems that are available.
And I think just adding on to that, I think being in an urban setting just adds on an extra layer of difficulty, if that's even possible. I think earlier on when you talked about the sense of safety that young people need or are craving to feel, I think you made the example that you could be walking to school, you're not sure if there'll be a pothole, you're not sure if you're going to get to school and there's water at school, you're not sure if I come back home and there'll be load shedding or not. Can I actually even do my homework? So I think that even adds on an extra layer, again, like I said, between the urban challenges that maybe rural areas don't experience. Hopefully, I'm just alluding then to the next episode that you'll have someone who is in that rural area that will be able to kind of give us a different lens into that aspect, because it's not like all of the young people are just here in the city. They are our brothers and sisters, our siblings, somewhere in we call it the Lales or the Geisheni, that's what I call it. And I think from what I'm hearing is that, yes, there are pathways to try and alleviate these issues, and there's drive for it, and there's eagerness from people who have the means to make a difference. But I think there's still like a missing link somewhere. I feel like we're missing something. It's almost like that you're waiting for a eureka moment. And I think from your experience, have you had that eureka moment? Is that even a thing? Are we just chasing something that actually it's never there, I think?
Yeah, I think, it's a very difficult question, because obviously we believe in what we're doing, but we are constantly changing and evolving and trying to create different solutions and trying to change what we're offering so that it meets up with people's expectations and needs. We can't just say this is it and we're not moving forward from here. This is what we do. So we have to acknowledge that we need to evolve. We have to acknowledge that we're not going to get everything 100% right. And And at the moment, I think the biggest challenge we have is that this entrepreneurship has become a buzzword. Everyone's an entrepreneur, everyone's a this, everyone's a that. When you say to someone, what is an entrepreneur? It's like, oh, and it's someone who runs their own business, or someone who has this, or someone who has that. And it's based on a very real need of, I can't find a job. What else can I do? I'm going to sell XYZ. And it's born of desperation. So there's not a lot of thought process that goes into that. So anyone who is not at work in a big office will call themselves an entrepreneur. Okay, when in reality, they're basically, most of them are hustling to get somewhere. And then they'll sit back down after a month or two or whatever and wonder why they haven't made any money, why there's no money in the bank, and they've been working so hard, because they don't have the fundamental business principles there. They haven't worked out that to sell a muffin, you have to count the cost of every little thing, plus the electricity, plus your client to make it, plus. And then you have to add on a little bit of profit for that. Otherwise, you are going to sit at the end of the month and wonder where your money's gone and say, but I've been working so hard and I've got nothing. And I think that sort of desperation needs to be addressed and sorted out. And we need to build proper entrepreneurs. You understand that business is not just an overnight success. You understand that you need to put in the building blocks of entrepreneurs. As much as we need to put in the building blocks of the actual person, we need to put in the building blocks of a business so that they can move forward. And yes, they might not move forward at the speed that they want to move forward, but hopefully if they follow the formula, they will be better in the long run.
And I think that's the thing. Unfortunately, I don't want to say this is a young person problem, but I think everyone across all different spaces, we all hope that we'll wake up one day and be instant millionaires. I think the world will be a better place. I think people will be kinder if I just wake up tomorrow and I say, I'm selling this, and then everyone will flock to me. And I like the fact that you turned it then onto the role of that young person. And the fact that, yes, certain things are born out of desperation or even out of need or out of inspiration. I think that's a better word, inspiration. But how do you see the role of young people themselves in shaping philanthropic priorities? Because we've talked about corporate, we've talked about an individual's person, or rather how an individual might think they want to help. But as a young person yourself, how do you see the role of the youth themselves in shaping these priorities?
I think they need to advocate for themselves. And that's a lot of that boils down to basically, again, understanding yourself, knowing yourself, being confident in yourself, right? Being able to say, these are my needs. I don't want a cup of soup.
Yeah. Teach me how to make the soup.
Teach me how to make the soup. This is what, and like say, advocate, teach people how to advocate for themselves without being arrogant, without being without coming across as being needy, but knowing yourself or knowing what you're doing well enough and having the confidence in what you're doing to be able to sell that and to be able to say that I am important, my business is important, you need my business because it delivers you XYZ. And having that ability to know that, okay, this business may not work, but I have the personality to think of something else. And I have the ability to think of something else. I have the building blocks to create something else. And so that is what they can do. They can drive the change from the bottom up and learn to speak their truth.
And I think I like the fact that when you switched it from a young person creating a business out of, well, I need something to be brought in, and switching it to a young person thinking you need me in action, because that's in actuality what's happening. It's not that people are out of jobs because they need it. It's actually the other way around, because if someone is employed to do something, it's because the task needs to be done and not vice versa. And I think just leading on to just the next point is that, what are sort of the partnerships or collaborations that you think are most needed to make this targeted philanthropy more effective? Do we need to move from, again, a numbers game to a more story orientated, a more person orientated collaboration? Do we need to move into I don't know, what are some of the partnerships that you think philanthropy needs to move more into?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's great to get to know the individuals well, but if you look at the actual need in South Africa, it is so great and so vast that the people that are offering trained internships and the ability for you to start your own business doing whatever it might be, whether it's pushing a drinks cart, or whether it's selling airtime, or whether all these little things. And it's not it's not what we would call a classical entrepreneur, but at least if they have something that they are earning money doing, they've got free space in their heads to chase their dreams and to whatever. If they've got some money coming in, they have a little bit more time and ability to conceptualize their own thoughts. So I do think that corporate South Africa needs to provide opportunities for young people to earn an income doing something that is not necessarily in an office. So like I say, if you're wandering around selling starter packs, or you've got an ice cream trolley, or you've got this, or you've got that. Yes, he's not a classical entrepreneur because he's being trained and he's being taught like this is how to sell an ice cream, or this is how to do this, or this is how to do that. Mm-hmm. He's got support. He's got a stock deal. He's got something going on. And maybe he does that in the day and he's busy working on his business plan at night. Mm-hmm. So that there's just some stability and some security while he's busy trying to figure out what his next step is. Mm-hmm. I think that's important, to be able to provide people with an instant source of income that can take them out of the situation that they're in, while still acknowledging that they have other capabilities. And that's not going to be his life forever.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting you say that. I was reading somewhere where someone said that people just in general, well, he was talking more so in terms of democracy, but are more pleasurable to be around when they feel economically and just say in terms of their livelihood, when they feel a little more stable. I think when a person is able to generate that for themselves, even better, because it's again boils down to the fact of safety again. Do I feel safe to now venture into the many different things that I would imagine myself as a young person wanting to achieve? And I think just touching on what you said in the beginning, what corporate needs to understand. So in an imaginary world, right? If you were given an unrestricted funding project to say that Ingalosi Foundation, Jean and your partners, this is X and X amount of funds that you have to make a change in the lives of young people, what would be your sort of pivot? What would be your planning session? What would be your pitch? What would be your bid for the next 5 years with that dream opportunity?
I think for us, it's always been about the vision that we've had has always been about the hub, our own hub. And for us, it's that safe space. It's the place where people can come to get actual hard assistance or hard skills. So, there'll be a computer lab, there'll be a meeting room, there'll be a boardroom, there'll be all these physical things. In addition to that, there'll be networking meetings, there'll be mentors, there'll be live sessions, there'll be all these things going on in this space where entrepreneurs can grow and feel that they are being seen and heard and that their needs are being catered to in a certain way. And I'm not saying that this isn't happening already, but that has always been our vision, is to have this place where entrepreneurs feel safe, feel seen, feel heard, can access stuff that they don't have, whether it's computers, whether it's space, whether it's whatever it is that they need, to be able to improve their lives and to improve their business. That's what our dream is.
Yeah. And I think for the entities that are in these places, if there's one piece of advice that you would give, whether it be to funders, whether it be to other NGOs, or even our listeners, especially young people who want to invest more into meaningful, impactful change, what piece of advice would you give them?
I mean, I believe wholeheartedly in collaboration, breaking down barriers, connecting with people. So there are so many NGOs doing very similar things. And yet because funding is so sparse and so limited, people try to like keep to themselves. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit hush-hush. Like, where did you get your money from? How did you do this? How did you do that? And there's no, and again, we've built a lot of good relationships with NGOs. But there's a lot of work that can still be done. And if just because this NGO is doing this doesn't mean that the other one can't do the same thing, and that this NGO can't help the other one out for whatever it might. So for me, yeah, it's breaking down barriers, creating connections, and I think that can be done on every level. There's no secret formula. There's no I know this better than you know this. There's just opportunities for learning and growing and understanding and creating a society where people genuinely feel that they can help each other.
So basically, people need to share the secret recipe. Just share it and then we all get to eat. It's like, in SpongeBob when Mr. Krabs is hiding away his secret Krabby formula. Like, just share and then everyone in the town will be able to eat. Yeah. And I think just drawing us to a close, unfortunately, I think we can go on and talk about young people and just the wonderful work that young people bring to a space, to just life in general. I think, like, looking ahead, what's your vision for the future of philanthropy and South African youth? I think we can start for the future of philanthropy first, because even just the future of young people is just a vast question. But yeah,
so I think we need to make a philanthropic mindset part of our ethos, really. And it's not that it's not there already. It just needs to be developed and honed and understood as what it is. So, I think one of the things that you notice most about when you're working in communities is that there is still this very deep desire to help other people, no matter how desperate your situation is. The thought process is that no matter how desperate I am, there's always someone more desperate than. And I've come into contact with so many people that have that mindset and that have that belief. So to be able to empower them they already believe in it, they already have bought into the idea. How, what do we do to improve their outcomes of being this philanthropic person, of being in this philanthropic society? How do we make that work for them? How do we make philanthropy work?
I think I actually love that, because it gives a sense of hope, because it's like there's still humanity even in the midst of such difficult times. And I think when we share, when we help rather than prescribe, I always say that it's like, it's not trying to make people less ill. It's about trying to make people something that they already envisioned themselves to be. And I just want to take this time to thank you for joining me in this deep dive, trying to understand young people, trying to understand how young people can not be helped, but help themselves. I think that's even more important. And I think thank you for such a thoughtful and inspiring conversation. I think what stood out to me is, again, the concept of safety. I think it's something that goes over people's heads, that safety isn't just necessarily physical, but it's emotional, it's financial, it's mentally, it's just safety in who I am as a person, and wherever anyone can come alongside that and help the unsexy sector. I think that's the goal. And I think this conversation around targeted philanthropy isn't just about where money goes. It's about listening, it's about adapting, and it's about meeting young people where they are. Whether it's creating safe spaces, bridging the digital divide, or building pathways for civic engagement, the work becomes transformative when it's rooted in the actual needs of the people we're trying to help, not in what we think we need to do. So I think for our listeners, the takeaway is clear, that youth aren't just beneficiaries, they are leaders, they are innovators and partners in shaping their own future. They just need a little bit of a nudge, just a shift in the right direction. So to our listeners, Auntie Jean, thank you for joining us on this episode of Ubuntu Uplift. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to share, to follow us on our LinkedIn pages, and to continue the dialogue. I think a large part of the work that we do in the civic space is that it shouldn't and it cannot end with one group of people. It should move on to the next person. So this conversation as well, move it on to the next person, maybe the inbox thing as well. And stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be unpacking again what meaningful youth-centered philanthropy can look like in South Africa, in different parts of the world. In different parts of our country before we move on to different parts of the world. But until then, I'm Oratile Mokase, and this has been Ubuntu Uplift.